Loved them both. He loved both groups of those people. Back several years ago, David and I were working on the dance studio. And don't hold this against Dave, but he's from California, okay? Just that's the reason you have to talk slow when you talk to him. He's from California. And he walked up to me one day, and he handed me his hammer. And he goes, "Hey, have you ever tried this? It's a California framing hammer." Is that what we call it? Okay. And it's about this long. Not really. It's about this long. It's at least 6 inches longer than the hammer I've always used, because I'm from Florida. And apparently, it's a Florida framing hammer. I don't know. But, and it's way heavier. And I used it like 3 times. I'm like, dude, take your hammer back. This is like, ooh. So I don't want this. And he didn't beat me up. He didn't, "Oh, you're such an idiot because you won't use my cool hammer." But little bit by little bit, I started using it. Guess what? About 3 weeks into the job, I whined my way into him getting me my own California framing hammer. I still have it. It has my name on it. I've given several people. I've given Keenan a California framing hammer. Because, man, once you get used to using it, it's like, dude, you can drive a nail with like 3. Yeah, it's heavier, but you don't use it near as much, and it's just really awesome. Church, God has given us some new and different ways to do things. He's a good father. He doesn't smack us around. "Why are you not using this new way?" But he knows, hey, look, this may feel weird to you. This may feel strange to you. It may be uncomfortable at first, but learn to take advantage of this new thing that I have, because it's way better. See, he's a good father. A good father is not abusive. A good father is not neglectful. A good father does what he does so that you can be better. And that's why our Father does what he does. And so that's the background of today's scripture, because last week we looked at the unrighteousness of the Gentile. Well, this time we're going to look more at the self-righteousness of the Jew. It still separated them from God, even though they were law-abiding citizens. They were law-abiding citizens. Their faithfulness to the law didn't translate to a heart relationship with the Father. So we're going to go ahead and start in Romans chapter 2. In chapter 3, we're going to find out that Paul is going to tell us that all have sinned. Doesn't matter whether you're Jew or Gentile. But he's also going to tell us that God is the God of both the Jew and the Gentile. Newsflash. Adam and Eve were not Jewish. Adam and Eve, as they walked in the cool of the garden with Jesus, or I believe it was Jesus, God, in physical form, they weren't Jewish. The Jewish nation isn't formed for years and years and years later. The Israelite nation, okay? So when we get thinking about, if I could pick who I want to go back and be just like, I want to go back and be just like Adam and Eve, walking in the cool of the evening with Jesus in the garden and talking about my day. That's what I really want to go back to, and I believe that's what he ultimately wants to restore. So here we are, Romans chapter 2, verse 17 through 20. "But if you bear the name Jew and rely upon the law and boast in God and know his will and approve the things that are essential, being instructed out of the law, and are confident that you yourself are a guide to the blind, a light to those who are in darkness, a corrector of the foolish, a teacher of the immature, having in the law the embodiment of knowledge and of the truth." If that's you, I got bad news for you. Your self-righteousness does not make you right with God. And notice how he says the blind, and we're going to get to that, but the blind leading the blind. Okay, so you fully believe because, man, I have followed the law. Remember the rich young ruler. And Jesus, he looked at Jesus, he goes, "Look, I've done everything. I've kept every law." Paul had kept every law. But his heart was still not right. He was still separated in his heart from the right relationship with the Lord. I really heard this conversation one time between our pastor and a police officer who is a member of our church. And the pastor said, he said, now you'd, if you caught me speeding, you wouldn't give your pastor a speeding ticket, would you? And his answer was epic. No, I'd give you 2 tickets because you know better. So all these people were so proud. I'm under the law, I know the law, I know the law. Okay, well, then you're going to be judged by everything that you know. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe being under the law is not such a good thing. But here's some interesting things, and we still see this today. There are some churches, some societies, some churches where it's not unusual for the pastor who is married, a pillar of the community, but everybody understands, well, he has a young girl who he kind of, they have a special relationship, and it's okay because she's not married. The Jews of that day, people who were in Paul's circle of influence, as long as she wasn't a Jew married to another Jew, well, it wasn't really adultery. They could go out and they could do whatever they wanted to do. Was that really what Jesus wanted for them? Oh, yeah, as long as you keep the letter of the law, you can do whatever you want to do. Jesus wants our want to change to be like his want to. Did Jesus ever want to do that? Was that the desire of his heart was to do all this stuff that goes against the heart of God? Well, no, it wasn't. So it can't be for ours either. So let's look at Matthew chapter 15 just for a second here. Verses 12 and 14. So Jesus and his disciples, they've had an encounter with the Pharisees. And the Pharisees are really upset because Jesus' disciples didn't do the ceremonial washing of the hands. Okay? And the Pharisees were like, ho, wait. It is written. Okay, now, you and I know, you look at the 10 Commandments, it's, thou shalt wash thy hands before you eat. It's not actually one of the 10 Commandments, but it was in the Mosaic laws, and it was something that was important to them. But Jesus' disciples didn't do it. And Jesus didn't go, boys, guys, come on, man, I've told you this before. You got to do this. You got to do this to stay in. Jesus never said that. So they've had this conversation. The disciples, verse 12, then the disciples came and said to him, do you know that the Pharisees were offended when you said, and they heard this statement? Jesus was like, no, I planned it. I was hoping it would offend them. I aimed straight at them. I used language that they would understand. I know that. But he answered and said, every plant which my heavenly Father did not plant shall be uprooted. Let them alone. They are blind guides of the blind. And if a blind man guides a blind man, both will fall into a pit. To think that your position is an excuse to not obey the directions of the Lord is laughable. You know the law, and so to hold others to it, but to give yourself a pass is simply ridiculous. We all know that. Do as I say, not as I do. Dads, does that ever work with our kids? Boys, I want you to do as I say, but not as I do. I'm going to disrespect for your mother, but don't you disrespect your mother. I'm going to speed and steal from the company, but now I want you boys to be honest. It's like, we have to lead by example. These people weren't leading by example, but they could have. They could have been that kind of thing. And this is an important thing that the Lord just kind of spoke to me today. You can raise your hand if you want. It's not a trick question. This is not a condemning question. I'll just go ahead and say all those things now so you will. There ain't no way I'm raising my hand. So, how many of you want more revelation from God in your life? I would say that's all of us. Now, I raised my hand. I wasn't doing it. I wasn't mocking you. I was actually raising my hand. I would like to have more revelation from God. So I'm going to keep my hand up. You don't have to keep your hand up. So, Mike, are you applying all of the revelation that you already have from God? No. Okay. So maybe the reason you're not getting more revelation from God is God is waiting you to go, so when are you going to apply the revelation I gave you yesterday? Hey, I gave you some revelation last week. What'd you do with that revelation? Oh, I wrote it down. I memorized it in 3 different languages. I have it in my journal. Are you applying it to your life? Not so much. Sometimes we want to be on the Revelation newsletter. We want to stack all these newsletters up. We want to put them in binders and so we can thumb through them every once in a while. But God's like, no, actually, I'd like for you to take this revelation and apply it to your life. Because guess what? I love you. And I want you to be more fruitful, because the more fruitful you are, the more joyous you are. And if you'll apply the revelation that I've given you, you'll be happier. If you stay within the lines, you will be happier. All right, so we're going to go back to Matthew 15, the encounter that we find the Pharisees. They're upset over the disciples' lack of hygiene. But Jesus knows, and he tells, in that whole thing, one of the things that Jesus says to him, he says, look, you're worried about my men washing their hands. And he throws out an example of how they have taken the law of God and they've twisted it to disobey the law of God. One of the 10 commandments says, honor your father and mother, right? Well, they'd come up with this new little commandment. It was called the Corban law, the law of Corban. Okay, so I have this stash of money. I'm going to say you are Corban. You can only be used for the mission of God. You can only be used for certain special things. And then your mom and dad, their rent comes due and they don't have it, and you're like, I'd like to help you, but I can't use that money because it's Corban money. It's only good for godly things. Well, but isn't one of the 10 commandments you're supposed to honor and take care of your parents in their old age? Well, I'd like to do that, but see, I got to obey this law, so that means I can disobey that law. It is amazing that God doesn't at some point just go, okay, But he usually doesn't. He does that sometimes, but so this is the group of people that Paul is talking to now. Verse 21 in Romans chapter 2. You therefore who teach another, do you teach yourself? Do you not teach yourself? You who preach that one shall not steal, do you steal? Do as I say, not as I do. It is amazing to me, and I just had this picture about people who they ask you to bear the weight of the law. Bear the weight of the law. And they usually do it while they're standing on you. So not only am I bearing the weight of the law, I'm bearing their weight on top of that. And Paul is just saying, look, you're doing all this stuff to the Gentiles. Don't you see what it actually says about your self-righteousness and how that separates you from God? Verse 22 and 23 says, you who say that one should not commit adultery, do you commit adultery? You who abhor idols, do you rob the temples? You who boast in the law through your breaking the law, do you dishonor God? Remember, twice Jesus comes into town and he does what? He goes straight to the temple and he cleansed the temple. Jesus cleansed the temple twice. Why did he cleanse the temple? Because you have made my Father's house, which is meant to be a house of prayer, you've turned it into a den of thieves. These people are coming to town to worship me, and you have made it impossible for them to even get to me. Because first, well, no, your sheep doesn't match up, so you're going to have to get a new sheep. Well, okay, how much is that going to cost? Oh, it's going to cost a lot of money. Well, okay, well, here's my money. Oh, I'm sorry, we can't take that money. We can only take religious money, so you'll have to go over here and change it. And the exchange rate was horrible. They had set up this religious system, and what was it doing? It was literally, how many of y'all have ever wanted to go somewhere? You go to Disney World or something with the kids, you go to Dollywood, and you go through so much hoopla and so long of lines that by the time it's over, people go, did you have a good time? To be honest, no, I had a horrible time. I spent a lot of money. I stood up for a long time. I got run over by a lot of people dressed in costumes, and no, it was not good at all. And here are people coming to worship, to have a worship experience. I can imagine my dad would have been the one who's like, we're never doing that again. We made it the one time, we're never going back. because they had used their own law to become a hindrance to people actually being able to keep God's law.